In the industry, does the label put pressure on you to say, okay, we want this style of record, or do you have total creative control with your production?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I do.
Like, will the label come at you say, now crunk is hot, we want Alchemist, we want crunk records, or make this style, or?
No, my head is hard as a brick. No, I'm not the right guy for that. Yeah, I probably missed out on a lot too in my career because I'm stubborn as hell. Like, do what I do, and you know, I'm not afraid to admit it too. There's probably a lot of opportunities I missed out on because, fuck that, I want to do it. I got to do it how I do it, because when somebody gives me a task, it's like, I don't know, I gotta go off of my script, the one that I came up with, and that's how it comes out best, you know, because I don't really consider this work. So once they give you a task, it becomes more work, and it's like, you know, that's a job. Yeah.
So I know there's a couple of producers in the room with us right now, and what advice would you give them with their beat making and getting their emotions and expressions out on the record, and trying not to be too influenced by the sounds of the radio?
I mean, you know, music is like, it comes from, you know, within, whether you're playing keys or you're finding samples, it's like something that comes from within, you know, and I think if you listen to, you know, a producer like 20 of their beats, like when I listen to, you know, 20 of any producer's beats, I know them a little better, you know, I get a feeling of who they are based on, you know, the sounds they use, the colors, the moods, you know, the swing of the drums, it's all personality, so I think it's just best to, I think it's good to be inspired by, you know, other things out there, and don't be afraid to use some elements from here and there, because over time you'll mix them up and create your own, you know. So I think it's good to be inspired, but original. I mean, I can't knock the radio because I have a better understanding nowadays, like going back and watching old documentaries, you know. About old musicians, they went through the same shit, like as far as radios, nothing new, you know, it was pop and commercial is what it is, but that sound changes, you know, so I think it's best that you just develop your thing and just master that, just kill it.
Yeah. So now once you've developed your sound, you've mastered it, how do you go about marketing yourself as a producer and getting the attention of the labels and the artists out there to try and shop your beats?
You gotta stand up on the table and just, you know, play your beats. And, I'm hot. You gotta sell it, man. Nah, don't do that. Please don't do that. I mean, networking, like situations like this, you know, even though if it's just in your city, you know, you might meet somebody who has a friend, you know, with all these social networks. I mean, everybody's connected now, so just stay on it, you know what I mean? You gotta stay on it. I see a lot of people who end up coming up, and I meet kids or, you know, other producers, like through traveling, and like, I was in Russia and I met this kid who was so great, didn't speak one word of English, and he just came to my room with his MP, and I was half asleep because we had just got off the plane. I was like, yeah, he wanted to play me some beats, and he started playing me these beats that were so crazy. He was like, it just, you know, made me snap into it, that it's like, it doesn't matter where you're at, you know, you just gotta keep networking and get out there, you know. It's people like A-Rab, you know, like A-Rab's a friend of mine now, you know, but I really just saw his footage on the internet, you know. I was like, yo, this kid is an anomaly, what the hell's going on here? It just amazed me. It was like, I wish that I was like, you know, 19, because I would really try that shit right now and try to compete with him, but you know, there's no way. He did, you know, he dedicated his life, you know, and, you know, once I got to meet him, he was a drummer, and a lot of that came from his knowledge as a drummer. But like, you know, just for example, he just put his thing up on the net, and, you know, he's doing work right now. So I'm happy to see him, and, you know, a lot of other people. So I think, you know, the opportunity's there. You just gotta really stay on it, you know, and you know, social skills too.
Right.
I don't, you know, take that with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean like, you know, blow up emails, you know, but I mean, I think, you know, with a grain of salt, you definitely got to stay on it, and it pays off if you got the right thing.
Well, definitely, you stayed on it and made a big name for yourself. Ended up linking up with Mobb Deep, which is where a lot of people are very familiar with the work that you did with the murder music and all of that. So how is it now that you took it from LA to Queens, and I have to say that until I was doing research on you, for all these years, I could have sworn that Alchemist was from Queensbridge, New York City. And then I found out you're actually from Beverly Hills, California.
I can't figure it out myself, man. It confuses me every day, man. I'm still, you know, I don't know what happened.
Like, what was the transition? One day you're in LA, you're making a record with Dilated Peoples,
kind of
working
crazy,
with Soul
right?
Assassins, and then you're on Murder Music.
It just makes no sense, man. I don't even get it myself, man. Shit.
So you work with Prodigy then.
Wow.
And the chemistry was great.
Yeah.
Now, on Murder Music, I think you're probably the only other producer other than Havoc. It was pretty much Havoc did 90% of the record. And how is it that Alchemist got their respect and their attention to get the 2 or 3 other slots on that record?
Definitely owe a lot to Muggs. You know, Muggs was like, put me on, you know, in a lot of ways. Because, you know, at first, like I said, I couldn't even get beats from him as a rapper. And then, like, when the Hooligans thing kind of just fell to the side, I started, he saw that, like, you know, I was like this young kid with an ASR, and he was like, yo, come to my crib and we can make beats. That was around the Cypress 3 time. Did a lot of work with him there, and eventually, you know, long story short, I moved to New York to go to school, and like, Muggs had been working at the time with Mobb Deep on his Soul Assassins album. And it was a guy from the West Coast named Bigger B. God, you know, God bless his dead, he's, you know, passed away, but he was like very instrumental on the West Coast as far as like, he worked at Loud Records. First person I ever heard say the word Wu-Tang Clan, I was like, what is that? You know, the word was so weird. You know, he was like a street rep and real pivotal person for Loud. You know, in the 90s in LA. He started working with Muggs, connected Muggs with Mobb Deep for the Soul Assassin album. That was right around the time I moved to New York. So, you know, being that I was Muggs' little homie, and he, you know, he was like, yo, you gotta meet these kids that's down with Mobb Deep, you know, the infamous Mobb, you know, these 3 guys, they're young, you know, they're not as good as Mobb Deep, but they're dope, they're exciting, you know, they're excited to work, right. You gotta hook up with them, you know. So basically that's how it was. Muggs just hooked us up. And I started working with them first, you know, Twin, Godfather, and Ty Nitty. And then we did Thug Music, and they were like, yo, we gotta play this for Pete, man. You know, it's gotta be on the Mobb Deep album, you know. And, you know, that didn't even happen until a little later. It was like, they said they were gonna do that, and then they just said, yo, keep coming to the studio, because, you know, we're working on, you know, Murder Music.
Yeah.
So, you know, I kept going over there, and I had a DAT with a bunch of beats on it, and I kept, it was like 16 beats on it. I remember we used to put the beats on DAT tapes. And I'd go to the studio, Soundtrack Studios, and it would be, like, Pete would be there, but not Havoc. And I'd play him a bunch of beats, and he'd go, yeah, I like this one beat. Then, like, come a couple days later, and then Havoc would be there, not Pete. You know, go through the same DAT, and he was like, I like this. They both picked the same beat. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know, Pete said he liked that one, too. It ended up being The Realist, the one with Cool G Rap.
Right, yeah.
It was like, so like a couple weeks later, Pete called me one night, yo, remember that beat, you know, bring it to the studio, we want to do it with Cool G Rap. Great, you know, so went right to the studio, you know, Cool G Rap's like probably one of my favorites all the time. And that's just how it happened. Went in, I used to carry my ASR, it was like carrying, you know, a machine gun, you know, like, that's what made me want to, like, I think I'm still lopsided, you know, walking around Manhattan with this big, you know, full body briefcase. Like, but I ended up going to the studio with that, and you know, Cool G Rap laid his rhyme, like literally wrote it right there on the spot, and everybody was, and that's how it really started, you know, with Mobb Deep. And it took time though, because you know, their circle's real, and you know, Havoc is amazing. I learned a lot. He's one of the most slept on, you know, to me, because he doesn't really get the credit. He's not out there like that, but him in the studio. You know, especially the days when he was just swimming in E&J bottles. You know, he doesn't really drink anymore. His beats are still incredible, but yeah. You know, I used to be amazed, you know, just watching him work. So it was like a big deal to me. I'm in New York by myself, Mobb Deep. I had to take advantage. You know?
So that was a big career change.
What up, ScaleXL? Yeah.